If you're like most pianists, you probably have a weakness around rhythm, especially if you were trained as a classical pianist, like I was. And I did have a problem with rhythm. I knew, how long the notes were and I knew how to count, but I really couldn't feel rhythm. So in the last few years, well, many years, I've been really working on being able to play all different kinds of music, not just classical. And in my search for becoming a more well-rounded pianist, I learned or taught myself how to play pop and rock and jazz and cocktail piano. And I noticed that there were things that were taught to me that looked like they were helpful, but they actually weren't. So tell me if this sounds familiar to you. You're taught that a quarter note equals 1 beat, and a half note equals 2 beats, and an eighth note equals half a beat, right? And that's true most of the time, not always. But when you look at a measure, for example, like this one from Debussy's Clair de Lune, which is a 9/8 time, and you say to yourself, oh, what in the world is happening? It's because there's some information that you're missing. So last week, one of my students and I were working on this particular measure here. His name's Tuan. Hi, Tuan. And I showed him a different way to think about rhythm, and he got it immediately, where before he was looking at it and going like, I don't know what's going on here. So if that's you, if you're looking at this measure and saying, I don't really know how to count that in 9/8 time, don't worry, I got you. I'm your best piano playing friend, and I'm going to teach you a new thing you may have never heard of. And by the end of this video, you're going to be able to look at this measure or any other and be able to make sense of it. You ready? Okay, let's get going. So the thing I'm going to talk to you about is the time ruler. So we know that we can use rulers to measure distances, right? Like inches or centimeters or whatever. But we can also use an imaginary ruler, but we can actually like draw it out if we wanted to measure time. And instead of measuring inches or centimeters or millimeters, we're going to measure beats in music. So if I were going to make a time ruler in 4/4 time, and my measure had only quarter notes in it, like this, then my time ruler would have 4 lines on it, 4 places that are being measured, and each one would have a number, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, if that measure had quarter notes and eighth notes in it, so now I would have to measure the distances in between of those 1, 2, 3, 4 because I've got smaller units of measure. Just like if we are measuring inches, then we would look at half an inch in between each inch. Right? If you're in another country, you probably don't use inches, but I'm in the United States where we use freedom measurements for everything.
Freedom.
Then let's say that you've got a measure that has 16th notes in it. So now you would have to split up that time ruler not only into 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, but now we would have to show the subdivisions in between those eighth notes, which would be the 16th notes. So we would say 1 eanda, 2 eanda, 3 eanda, 4 eanda. All right, now what does this have to do with this particular measure here? Well, if we look at this measure, we see that there's a lot of really intricate stuff happening, right? So we're in 9/8 time. 9/8 time means that you have 9 beats in each measure, and then eighth note gets counted as 1 beat. All right, so that means we would have to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in each measure before we move on. So in this measure, though, we've got a bunch of 16th notes, we've got eighth notes, we've got a dotted quarter note, 2 dotted quarter notes actually. There's stems going up, stems going down. It looks like a lot, but it's actually quite simple. So let's talk about the stems going up and down first. The stem going up and the stem going down on one note just means that that one note is serving 2 purposes. Let's take a step back. Imagine that you and a friend are singing a song and you're not singing the same thing at the same time. Like one of you is harmonizing while the other one sings the melody. So let's say your friend is singing the top line here. Do you see where the stems are going up? So that would be... Okay, so your friend would be singing bum, 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 bum. So that would be the stems going up. And let's say you're singing the notes with the stems going down. So you're singing at the same time, and sometimes you're singing the same note, and that's why it's got a stem up and stem down. But let's say you were singing the notes with the stems down. Your part would be this. So you're singing what your friend is singing, but you're also singing stuff in between. Bum, 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 bum. Okay, bum, 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 bum. There's a lot going on. And together, if you would sing together, it would sound like this. All right, so that's what the stem up and stem down is all about. It's one note, but it's kind of in two separate voices. And we have something similar to that in the left hand with the first note. So we see that it's meant to be kind of like a bass note being held, but it's also part of that arpeggio, okay? So that's not rhythm. That's just like making sense of what's going on. I learned recently that if you're not subscribed to a channel and I say the word subscribe, that the subscribe button underneath the video is supposed to like glow or something. I don't know if it works or not. So I'm going to say the word subscribe. Can I say it? I sure can. Subscribe. Let me know below. Did the subscribe button glow? That's kind of cool, right? Now let's take our time ruler and apply it to this measure. So first we're going to just show the eighth notes, because in this kind of music, in 9/8 time, the eighth note gets one beat. So our big beats are going to be eighth notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now we see we also have 16th notes. So we have to put in those in between beats, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 and a lot going on there. Now, if we apply that time ruler to this measure, it becomes very, very simple to understand. We basically have something happening on every 16th note beat. So if I were going to play the right hand and the left hand together here, without really, thinking about musicality, just lining up the notes with the time ruler, it would just be something happening on every single 16th beat. So here we go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 and. So you see there's nothing tricky happening. The tricky part happens because we're hearing syncopations here. A syncopation is where you have a note happening or an accent happening on a normally weak beat, like an and, right? So we don't normally say 1 and 2 and 3 and. We normally count 1 and 2 and. Do you hear where I'm stressing 1 and 2 and? So if I put my accent on the and, that would be considered a syncopation. 1 and 2 and 3 and. So that's kind of what's happening here. Listen, I'm going to show you and I'm going to bring out those syncopations, which are the right hand eighth notes, which is the melody, and the left hand as well. So if you look at just that melody with the eighth notes, the right hand and the left hand are playing the same exact notes, an octave apart. So melody is happening in octaves. Listen, I'm going to bring out those syncopations. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 and. Right? So let me play that without counting, and I'll give it some musicality. And this is the genius of Debussy. He just took a bunch of 16th note rhythms and made it sound really complicated and cool. That's it, right? It's just a bunch of 16th notes. You can do this with any piece of music. Here's what you do. You can figure out your time ruler based on what is the smallest subdivision in that measure. So if your smallest subdivision is an eighth note, then you would only have to go to eighth notes. So if it's 16th note, 16th notes, and so on. Just like on a ruler. All right, now if you want to get really good at rhythm, I've got an entire series of courses that are so affordable. I'll put a link below to my Rhythm Master set of courses. You can take a look there. And if you want to play Clair de Lune, but this is just way too much for you right now, guess what? I made an easy version, which you can see right here. And it's in a different key, but it sounds really good. But if you are working on WC's version, I actually have a few videos where I practice it and I tell you what I'm doing when I practice. You can see that over here. Keep practicing, have fun, and I will see you soon. Bye.